Hi, everyone. This is Michael Rubino here with another Mold Talks. I have a very special guest, and her name is Victoria. Victoria, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone? Let everyone know why you're here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Victoria, and I dealt with mold issues for 5 years unknowingly and didn't discover until my fifth year that mold was a problem in the apartment that we lived in. I'm really excited to be doing this talk because I think mold needs to have awareness, and there's just not enough around it. And to know that this platform is bringing awareness to people that might need it or are getting answers that they might not have is honestly such a privilege. So I'm really excited to do this.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day and coming here to talk. As you mentioned, it is a very important topic that needs way more awareness than it currently has. But I think we're making some good strides here. So I've been doing this for a while. So kind of when I first started, there really wasn't much awareness. As a matter of fact, I would say I saw like a very small niche percentage of the population that just wasn't feeling well. So it's
Mhm.
very interesting to see where things started and where they came. And yeah, obviously, if you look back in time, there was a lot of talk about mold in the 80s and 90s, but then it kind of died out for a while. And interestingly enough, there's like a 20-year study from the EPA on mold that still hasn't been concluded, but we're not waiting for anybody else. We're hitting the guns blazing because we know that this impacts people. So why don't we start with kind of the 5-year period where you were living in mold unknowingly? What did that feel like? How did you start to not feel well? What were some of the symptoms you had?
Yeah, so I think this might be geared more toward the ladies in the audience, but it started with birth control. And, I just started feeling changes that I knew were not normal or weren't who I really was. And so I had talks with my husband, got it removed. I had the Nexplanon implant and thought after 2 years, like, okay, this will help things get better. And while there were a couple things that did improve, it seemed like there were additional things that just gradually stacked on throughout the years of living in this apartment. And, most people think, right, maybe not those who are listening to this podcast or watching this video, but there are people who think that you have to see mold in order to have proof of mold. And this apartment had absolutely no indication whatsoever about there being mold present. It didn't smell like it, nothing. It was a really nice place. And so it never once crossed my mind. But there were things that started happening like hair loss, eventually fatigue that got so bad that I was not able to do anything at all. There were things like mood swings, which you would think that would have gone away with birth control, but not necessarily. I was aggravated all the time and anxious all the time. And it's just crazy that when you start diving into the world of mold, you start learning what it really can do to you. And it's such a broad spectrum, like it really is. But it's the awareness of how can you equip people to be their own advocate with this situation, and how can you equip people to look for it, know what to look for, right? If something feels off, and even though your doctors are telling you you're fine, listen to your intuition and start digging a little bit deeper, because that's what ultimately I had to do, especially that last year of living in that apartment. But yeah, it was a lot of little things that just added up and overall made me feel like I was never going to get answers and I would have to live the rest of my life that way.
Yeah, and that's not a good place to be in, just physically, mentally, it's just not, not good. Let's dive into the doctor piece a bit. So you
Yeah.
mentioned that, the doctors were not giving you answers. So, how many doctors did you see, and what were some of the things that they were thinking? I would imagine, obviously, not that it was mold. So I'm curious to see kind of what that journey was like.
So initially I had thought, like I said, birth control was going to be the problem that solved, or the thing that solved everything, the removal of. And it didn't. And so I started going to doctors for hair loss, thinking maybe there is some kind of hormonal imbalance happening. And, my mom had thyroid cancer. So I thought like maybe that is my story too. I don't know. But my panels would come back totally normal. And I would ask, well, why is my hair falling out? From the hair falling out, it it changed to skin issues on top of that, would go see dermatologists. And, the thing about doctors, and I'm not totally discrediting them, I think the majority has to do with the way the system works.
Yeah,
But
totally.
it's you go in, they see you for 5 minutes, maybe if you're lucky, 5 minutes. Um, they give you some kind of topical cream or whatever it is that hopefully fixes your ailments. See you in 3 weeks, come back later, and it doesn't do anything. I saw I saw quite a bit of doctors, like more than a handful. And all of them would tell me basically it was all in my head. I was fine. My labs were normal. Do I need to go see a specialist? Kind of in a way that was like, just to appease you, do we just send you to a specialist? And, I knew that this didn't have to be my story, and I didn't want it to be my story. So I started digging in. And, I think unfortunately, but also fortunately, it's kind of what you have to do these days if you're not getting any kind of answers. So the gaslighting is a very real thing. And I know I'm probably not the only one who's ever gone through it.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely not the only one who's ever gone through it. I talk to people every day going through it. It's really frustrating, and I've talked about this a lot on various podcasts, but essentially the way our medical system is designed, they don't ask about your environment. If you're lucky if they even ask about what your diet is.
Yeah.
And it's like, as human beings, we have this foundation, right, between eating good food, water, air, etc. And so when you don't have the right foundation, of course, that's where your health starts to decline. And they never ask about the foundation. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, well, if you have this, here's like this antibiotic, or here's this topical cream, right? And they say, come see me in 3 weeks, because they're not really sure if it's going to work. I mean,
Yeah.
it's literally, that's how it is, right? So it's very frustrating, because for so many people, like you said, you have to essentially advocate for your own health. And I think maybe that's just something that we all need to start doing,
Yeah.
because we just kind of went to doctors and expected that they had all the answers, right? I mean, that's just kind of how it is. And doctors are people. They went
Yep.
to school for 8 years or longer, but they're just people. And, I don't know any person that has all the answers, not all of them, maybe some of them. So we have
Right.
to start to look at this like, okay, do we need to put all of our trust and faith in doctors? Or is it okay to go visit doctors for information, and maybe see a few different doctors for varying points of view and varying different information? And
Mhm.
also, should we do our own research, right? I
Right.
mean, sometimes I literally will go to a doctor and be like, I have this for sure. This is what I have. Like, I have bronchitis for sure. I have all the symptoms. Like, let's just get start there, and then they'll be like, yep, we tested you. You have bronchitis. Congratulations.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
like, why? Because I try to research what I'm going through, so that when I get to the doctor, I'm really just making sure that they agree, or if they don't agree, I'm asking, why don't you agree?
Right.
And tell me why, or prove it to me.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's like, you have to understand and know your own body. And if you think about it, the person sitting on the other side, this doctor, they're relying on the information you're giving them, and then they only know how to take that information and put it into different baskets, right? Like,
Right.
oh, that sounds like lupus. Oh, that sounds like, an autoimmune disease, right? And then they have, okay, which treatment plans work for these different baskets? And
Right.
so you get prescribed whatever that is. And that's one way to look at medicine for sure. But I always ask, like, okay, but why do I have that? Like, what happened that I now have that, right? Like, your body had to have become weakened by something to then be susceptible to that.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's genetic predispositions, but mostly I'm looking at like, what caused that, because genetically I had no idea that I would be susceptible to something like that, because my parents didn't have it. So
And
it's very interesting, right? Kind of how we do this whole medical song and dance here. And I'm very sorry for the frustration that you went through on this. And yes, many people go through this, and they're gaslit because when a doctor doesn't know the answer, they just go like, it's got to be all in your head because doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. There are no conclusive answers on paper, so therefore it's in
Right.
their head, right?
Which is
I,
it's kind of narcissistic, don't you think?
a little bit,
A
a
little
little
bit.
bit, yeah,
We'll just
but
call it a little bit.
just a smidge.
Just a
Uh,
smidge.
but I think that's a big missing component is people learning to ask why, right? Or being brave enough to do your own research or even say something to someone that has the professional title, right? And I think maybe people just don't feel empowered enough, maybe, to stand up to white coats, these people who've
Yeah.
gone through extensive schooling. But like you said, at the end of the day, if your body is changing, that white coat, that other person, whatever, like cannot know your body like you know it,
Sure.
doesn't see the changes that you see throughout the years or the days because they're not you. So I don't know. I wish more people would become more brave or empowered or whatever it is, maybe even sometimes not lazy to just do your own research and really pay attention to the cues that your body is giving you, whether it's mold related or not, you
Totally.
know.
Yeah, and I think the way things work on this planet essentially is like you have microbiology, for example, right? The microorganisms that live on this planet, like mold, bacteria, viruses, right? These things are ever changing, right? And so medicine needs to also be ever changing because the things that make us sick are also ever changing. And so when people see things that are bizarre, instead of being like, I don't believe you, it's all in your head, it would be cool to kind of digest that and say, I don't really know, this is a little peculiar for me, but I certainly want to call some colleagues and figure it out. It's just kind of like we've all just become accustomed to this routine, and even doctors, like they just have a routine. They don't have time, or they just don't care enough to, go ahead and do further research on what could be troubling you, calling colleagues, doing some things. Because maybe, just maybe, if they had made some calls, that somebody could have said, hey, we've seen some bizarre things with mold. You should, potentially have that checked out. Because at that point, you would have sped up the process from 5 years to, I don't know, maybe one or less,
Yeah,
you know,
that would have been
it
great.
would have been great. So what happened in those 5 years? Obviously you mentioned the symptoms, the health decline. Did it impact your mental health too, as it usually does so many people?
Yeah, it did. I like I said, the removal of birth control helped with some things, but it's kind of like after the accruing of some symptoms, the mental health was kind of one of those things that kind of came back, right? The decline of mental health. So I would get really anxious, irritated, and depressed. And, I would kind of sit there and go, well, this definitely wasn't who I was even pre birth control, right? It's like, why is this happening? I don't understand. And it's like you sit there and you think to yourself, I have so much to be grateful for, which everybody does, right? It might look
Totally.
different, but everyone does. And so you go to that reflection perspective of who you were before to who you are now. And you can't help but ask, what's going on here that's making me feel this way that's not normal to me, right? And I think, my husband, he would notice that too, but he didn't think too much of it. And it's kind of like, well, we thought that you getting that thing out of your arm would have been the answer to everything, but it just wasn't. And so, I kind of dealt with it on and off, right? Like some days I would be fine, some days I wouldn't, with the mental health aspect, right?
Sure.
Um, and it's just once those other things started happening, like the fatigue, like, I mean, bad. I would lay down from probably like once noon to 3, it was game over for me and I would just crash. Um, so yeah, it was a lot of little things that started adding up and eventually that snowball gets way too big that it's going to go everywhere. And that's pretty much what happened. Um, for me to realize that something was off, whether it was me or the environment, or probably both, but I needed to look into it further.
Yeah, and the first off, I want to say, like, when your quality of life is severely impacted, right? I mean, like, I would say to be considered a healthy human being, you would probably be able to last the day without crashing between 12 and 3, right? And I can't imagine how frustrating that is, because who has 3 hours in their day to just take a nap? Nobody, right? Like, you have stuff to do. So the frustration and the anxiety, because like the anxiety is like wondering, will I ever get better? Right. I
Yeah.
mean, that would give me anxiety,
Yeah.
and so it's like when you piece all these things together, like it's no wonder it's impacting our mental health, because it's severely reducing our quality of life. And yeah, we're never thinking about it.
Right.
What finally pinpointed you to the fact that you knew you had mold? Like, how did you get to that determination?
Yeah, man. I sit there and I kind of go like, how did I, kind of figure it out? And um I think what opened the door was thinking maybe I had candida,
Okay.
because I knew a friend who had gone through that. And so I bought this doctor's book called The Yeast Syndrome, went to go see him, tried his protocol. It did nothing. Maybe helped me for like a month, but then I would, kind of crash back again. And I thought, okay, well, this definitely isn't what's wrong. But then I learned too that if there's mold present in the system, it invites other things to happen, like candida overgrowth.
Totally.
And so I think that was the missing puzzle piece, right? That kind of made the whole picture so much more clearer, because it wasn't really that clear before. And so yeah, I think it was just I'd had enough. I was tired of going to allopathic doctors. I was tired of going to the naturopath that I followed his protocol for candida. It did nothing. And I thought, okay, I have to figure this out by myself.
Yeah.
And so I started digging, found people like you, found people like PJ Harlow on Instagram, and just started really diving in. Found people who were dealing with mold, either they were recovering from or had past experience with. And to hear their perspective and go, that sounds like me. That sounds like me. Oh my gosh, that's so relatable. It gives you encouragement to keep going and keep digging and to keep fighting. And so that's exactly what I did. And I ended up finding another naturopath who offered a mold test. So she would do blood work. She didn't know how to read it, but she offered it, which confirmed my suspicions that
Mm.
there was mold in my system. And the really interesting thing, too, that my husband told me like 2 years before I had discovered that it was mold, he would start waking up really tired and groggy every morning, not energetic at all. But the interesting thing about that too is how, like, kind of a side rant, how it affects people differently is if he and I would go travel somewhere else, he would bounce back quickly and I still wouldn't. Um, so, for him to tell me, oh, yeah, I wake up really tired in the mornings and groggy and drained, well, that's something else that makes me realize it's not just me and it's an environmental thing. Like it has to be. And so, yeah, anyway, fast forward to go seeing this doctor who offered the blood work. Um, I was able to prove to the people who had thought I was crazy, even some family members, unfortunately, that there was in fact mold present in my system. So from there, I just started digging, finding books like that toxic book by Neil. I forget his name. Do you know which book
Dr.
I'm?
Neil Nathan. Yeah.
Yeah, Neil Nathan. There we go. And I told my husband, I was like, all right, well, it's obvious. I have to hire a mold inspector. And so I ended up hiring a mold inspector after very thorough research
Good.
because I know that mold inspectors can be not the most reliable.
Sure.
So actually, it was Texas mold inspectors
Cool.
that I had hired, and they came. They did the wall cavity sample behind the shower, which was my initial culprit. And what I had done that I think might benefit some people if they have suspicions, maybe something's coming from their shower or behind their walls, is to really do my own research before doing this. I had purchased a moisture meter from Home Depot.
Hmm.
I would go around just to see what the moisture content behind was, and it would register 100% all over the shower. So anyway, he came, inspected. Sure enough, there was mold. He looked at the HVAC, and the mold blood work that I had done had matched with the mold testing that was done by the mold inspector.
Isn't that
So
something?
that's really something. And then some for the mold testing, right? Because he could catch more than maybe what was in my system or whatever they offered in the blood work. But it was just, I think, really going off that intuition of, I know I don't have to live my life this way forever. I know this isn't my story. I know that there are answers, even if nobody wants to believe that there are. I have to trust my intuition and keep doing this. And it was hard because it was expensive.
Sure.
There were all those doctors that I had seen, all those testings or tests that I would do. And that was the really hard part, but nothing will ever be as priceless as your health will ever. So, while maybe that might put off some people, it's figuring out where can you make sacrifices to how your budget looks to prioritize your health. And that's what we had to do. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's kind of
Yeah, no, it was a great
what
answer.
happened.
I really appreciate it. A lot of things that are coming up for me is, I've spoken with people who, obviously have dealt with this, who have had financial difficulties. And it's always really difficult because obviously everyone's in different financial perspectives and situations. But there's been times where I've spoken to families who are like racing against time, like they're too sick to work.
Yeah.
So they need to fix this so they can get better to go back to work to pay for it all.
Hmm.
And, like they have to obviously take out credit and stuff. But when you look at this, like, what happens if you're too sick to work? Like you're stuck on disability. And then
Yeah.
your quality of life just literally goes down until there's no more life left. And that's a situation that certain people are in. And obviously, these are extreme cases, but this happens a lot more than I'd like to see. And yeah, you have to prioritize your health.
Right.
And they always say the best investment you can make is in yourself. Well, when you improve your health, you're going to have better mental clarity. You're going to make better choices, better decisions, better investments, the whole nine, right? So you have to confront this problem head on. And look, if it's too big of a problem, disclose it, sell your house, buy another house that is well within your budget where you could remediate it and invest in that properly.
Right.
If you're renting, you have to make that difficult decision of moving out, and that may require an attorney to help you break your lease.
Right.
But these are choices that we can make. There's something we can do.
Absolutely.
And it was so great that you were able to kind of get that ball rolling. So you got some remediation done.
No, actually. So we were renting, and
Okay.
I had started documenting when I had purchased the moisture meter,
Okay.
taking videos of what I had found, narrating everything, deciding that once I go forward to email the leasing office about my suspicions of there being mold, that I was going to keep a paper trail of every single thing. I wasn't going to try to make it phone call because you can't really record that, right? But you
Sure.
can paper trails with emails. So I made sure to do that. And I had finally, once I had the blood work done, I had gone to the leasing officer, like emailed them, I should say, that I had suspicions there was mold. And they were very shocked, right? As they probably would be. But that they're just playing a game.
Mhm.
And so you have to kind of play the game with them. And I showed them my blood work, and we had the property manager of that apartment come, who was in charge of maintenance. And he had said to me after I showed him my blood work with the doctor's actual name on it, "Did you do your own blood work?" Yeah, man, I have a lab in my closet. You want to come see it? Like, what kind of question? What kind of question is that? Um, so, that to me just made me realize like they're going to do everything they can to not lose
Mm,
tenants because we're paying money to live there.
totally.
They had told me that I could hire a mold inspector, but it had to be a mold inspector of their choosing. I did not listen to that. And I said, I will hire my own mold inspector and you will pay me if there is evidence of mold. So I did that. That's when I hired Texas mold inspectors. And whenever I had the report back, I emailed it to the leasing office to show them that my blood work had matched what the mold inspector had found. And we were able to, after, gosh, it was probably 3 weeks, terminate our lease. There was a lot of back and forth there. There was no attorney involved, thankfully, but I really think that it's just being kind of a pain in their butts, but also with such proof that they cannot ignore that they know they could get in trouble for if I wanted to have gone that route. I could have, that they probably went, it's best to let her go because no matter what we say to her, even if we hire our own mold inspector, nothing, which they did, nothing can top the truth that has already come out.
Right.
So yes, that's how I was able to get out, but there was no remediation involved. There was a lot of throwing out, unfortunately, of items that we could no longer keep,
Yeah,
which again is a sacrifice you have to make, right?
totally.
Uh, but but that was kind of how all that went.
What would you say you think was like the most successful thing you did in, the way you documented or what have you, that allowed you to kind of get out of that lease without the need of a lawyer and all that stuff? Because I think that's valuable for
Yeah,
people who are in similar situations. Because obviously, once you start to get an attorney involved, it gets a lot more expensive. Sometimes it's necessary because maybe they're not as nice or smart, I would say, in this case, because they obviously saw the value in letting you break the lease versus the repercussions it could have for them. So,
right.
what are some successful things you think you did right that really helped you?
Yeah, so I would definitely say the first thing that I would encourage people to do is to start documenting everything, whether that's buying a $30 moisture meter from Home Depot. If you have suspicions it's a certain area in your room, start recording everything with narrations, days, times, show that it's actually, what's today, February 1st, right? 2022, and make sure you mention that. And I would say too, that's not going to be enough for you to break your lease to say, hey, there's 100% moisture content behind my shower tiles. You have to also obtain proof. So maybe if that's like a urine test from Great Plains or Real Time Lab or blood work from somewhere, if you can find a naturopath that offers that, I would encourage that. And, if that's the most that you can do, I would start to fight with that. And if it comes to the point that you have to hire a mold inspector, you know, um, there might be some sacrifices that have to be made for you to do that, to find a credible one. So honestly, the big thing I think that was successful for me was persistence through that documentation. And, I think too is just providing undeniable proof that you could get them in trouble with if you decided to take the route of hiring an attorney. Because apartments like to make money, they don't want to lose money, they don't want to go to court. So, what would help them is to just settle by letting you break that lease. I don't know if that is really helpful. And I realize that that was probably kind of redundant to what I had said previously. But to be honest, those are the exact things that I did. But I would say if you're in this fight right now, don't give up, just keep being persistent. Um, Try to find answers that you can in any way that you can, which I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are trying to do just that. But that would be my advice, and I don't know if that is helpful.
Oh, it was. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, what happened after you broke your lease? You moved out, obviously. Did you find a new place? Kind of Catch us up on that. How did you make sure you didn't have the same problem again? Would love to kind of hear that.
Yeah, so I think it's now when you understand the world of mold, you have this certain awareness that just comes with all the years of going through the things that you have, and the experiences that you had, and it's not to be dismissed. But I do want to say before I keep going further into the answer, I don't want people to be fearful of everything, right? Like if they're trying to get out of a place and move into a new one, I think that there is a certain amount of caution that needs to be had and prevention that you can take in your own life, but it shouldn't debilitate you with fear. Because it is a scary thing to go through, but there's no need for it to let it consume you. So I did move out. We moved in with my with my in-laws for 6 months. And I was grateful for that, but it was difficult.
Sure.
And when we were ready, we started looking for a home. And I think I might have been a little over the top with this, but I would take my moisture meter with me. And I live in Texas. So, buildings here, homes here are going to be notorious breeding grounds for mold because of flooding, humidity, all this stuff, right? But when we found one, it was the realization of what I could do to help prevent further growth of, or now I know what to look for and how my body responds to mold, that if I start feeling that way again, I know exactly what I can do, right? I know exactly what approach to take. I think part of that recovery too was going on a mold protocol and clearing my body out, finding ways that I could support my body to clear those spores out as much as I could. But also, I think just getting out of that environment that had robbed so much away from me was enough to give me some of my life back to go, okay, new beginnings. So, yes, moving in with my in laws for 6 months. Um, if you have the opportunity, take it. It might be hard, but it's a place where you can start your recovery for sure.
That's awesome. So did you end up finding a home yet, or are you still on the hunt?
No, we found one. We've been in this house for almost a year. It's been
Nice.
yeah, it's been really, really good. I haven't really had any other kind of issues since living in that apartment. I'm very grateful. But I am always aware, right?
Totally.
So if I notice something needs cleaning, I get on top of that. Or if I notice something is off, it's how can I approach it from, again, not a place of fear, but just proactiveness.
No, that's really important because you do need to be proactive to really maintain your environment. And I think for most of us that are homeowners, we tend to be more reactive
Mhm.
because we wait for the window to leak before we fix it instead of like checking the windows to see if, they need to be fixed before they leak, things like that. So it's great, once you do have that awareness, you do know you need to be proactive, not reactive, because it's going to not only save you time and money, but, impacting your health is important too. So you've been there for about a year and you're starting to feel better. Did you take any measures before you bought the house to like inspect the home or anything like that?
So, because we had, and this is just my personal story, because we had spent so much money on doctors and, um,
Sure.
money on supplements and protocols and things like that, we did not do a mold inspector. But it was just knowing what to look for from my personal experience throughout those 5 years. Um, right. Of like, okay, the shower is obviously moldy. There could be something behind. And while I know that my naked eye can't pick everything up that goes on behind the walls, again, it's just being aware of if something does arise, I know what to do. So there was no extensive testing other than the regular home inspection and me going around with my moisture meter, being Miss Detective. My poor realtor was probably like, this girl's crazy.
We're the good kind of crazy though. We care about our health crazy. So that's good.
Absolutely.
Did you find anything when you did the moisture meter around the home?
This one, no, not really. So really grateful for that. And, I think I think we got really fortunate as far as environment goes,
Awesome.
with that. Yeah. So no, thankfully.
Good. And now you're healing.
I
You're
am healing. Yeah.
good. And you
Healing.
started healing like 6 months prior, I guess, when you were in your in-laws' place, and that's kind of continued into the new place, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it was just learning more about my body, its physiology, the ways that I could support through food, through nourishment, through exercise, sunlight, taking more of a holistic approach with things that have really worked really well for me. And I'm really excited because I'm expecting a baby. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, thank
Congratulations.
you. Thanks.
That's
So
amazing.
it's been a ride, but one that I wouldn't trade for the world because of the awareness it's brought.
That's awesome. So you're getting healthy, you found a place, you're having a baby. This is all really amazing stuff.
Yeah,
Fast forward, what, 3 years earlier, you probably would have never pictured where you are now.
not at all. Not at all. So it's been a really incredible ride, a tough one for sure, but I'm just so thankful and blessed that I've been able to be where I am today with all that, right? There's always I like the saying the valley is always fertile, and I think sometimes people forget that, right? Like when we picture ourselves in the valley, everything is hard and there's doom and gloom. But if you open your eyes just a little bit more and you look around a little bit more, the valley has flowers because it's a meadow. And you just have to choose to look at it that way.
Yeah, totally. It is a big mindset. And as you know, it's hard to have a positive mindset when
Yeah.
your quality of life is suffering. But I think the only way to really get through it is to kind of make that determination that like I am getting through this. You
Yep.
said several times like you basically were like, I am not going to let this define me. And that determination propelled you forward and it allowed you to become more aware and do the research needed to equip yourself with what the knowledge that you now have and
Mhm.
continue to could keep up. So I really appreciate the fact that you not only did that and went through that, and now you're willing to share your story because you know that it'll help others. It's really amazing.
Yeah, that's my hope. My hope is that everyone can find, if your fire is diminishing, you can find a way to rekindle that, to keep moving forward because there really is hope, right? It's just a lot of it has to come from you to keep choosing to take, further steps to keep propelling yourself forward. Um, but yeah, I really hope that somebody finds this story helpful.
I mean, I'm even hopeful in listening to your story and everything that you've been through and seeing that the education side of things really was able to help. Because I think one of the challenges that I'm facing is, you know, how do I help 6 billion people? And where did I get that 6 billion number from? Well, the World Health Organization says that 9 out of 10 people do not breathe clean air indoors and outdoors.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, we have 7 billion people and change. 90% of that, we're looking at what, six and change. So this is a lot of people that we need to reach in many different languages.
Hmm.
And I think that it gets there with education. As you saw, education for you really equipped you with being able to handle this.
Yep.
And not only gave you hope, but allowed you to actually take action. And
Yeah.
so it provides me hope because that's kind of my next chapter is getting more into education and helping people through education rather than trying to fix this one home at a time. Cause I think that's not going to get us where we need to go.
Yeah. Yep. Knowledge is power. There's absolutely truth to that. But
Yeah.
that's amazing that you're trying to take that route. And I think,
Yeah,
with
I'm
your
at
platform.
literally building a school as we speak,
Oh,
hoping
wow.
it'll be done by April. And we're going to be doing in-person hands-on training. We're going to open it up to other contractors and stuff to come and, get training that they need to start to become more aware of this. Hopefully we can get some regulations in place regarding training because everybody should have training to work on homes because guess what? This is where the problems are.
Yeah.
So I'm very hopeful that that's going to kind of push us to reach more people and help more people organically through that. And then, yeah, I want to open up an online course for, a free online course for just individuals, families to take and become more aware of their environment, their surroundings, and what to do, so that things don't need to get as expensive.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's the idea.
I'm really excited about that.
Me too. And
Yeah.
you'll be hopefully one of the first ones to take the course. I think you'll
Cool.
ace it because you already know so much and have traveled down that rabbit hole. But I'm hoping there'll be at least a couple things that you can learn from.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, I'm gonna keep following along so that I can see how that comes to fruition, and I'm sure it will help a lot of people who really need information like that.
That's the idea. And this, just you sharing your story with me, really is empowering me to continue to forge ahead, because I know that knowledge piece is going to be very impactful. What is like the one thing, and you can only have one thing, what is the one thing that you would recommend, to somebody else that could be potentially in your shoes, or your shoes prior to you where you are now? What is the one thing that you think could be the most helpful?
So, the one piece of advice that I would give someone that's walking through this and feels like there's no light is, and this is going to be a lengthy answer, but I promise it's one thing. um, Trust your intuition. You know your body better than anybody else does and ever will. Keep fighting, and you will get there. You will get to the end of the tunnel. You have to just trust yourself, and you have to trust that intuition and what it's telling you that something's off. That's honestly was the only thing that kept me going forward, that led me to the education piece, that led me to finding answers, that led me to getting out to heal. That I can't emphasize that enough. Yeah.
Victoria, thank you so much. This was like such an amazing episode. And, I think I feel hopeful. I'm hoping many other people do too. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. And, I know it's going to be impactful and help other people. And, we definitely are trying our best to create this awareness and get people the information they need. So thank you for being a part of that.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thank you for letting me tell my story.
Definitely. Well, I hope to stay in touch, and we'll let you know when the school is ready, and we'd love to have you.
Yeah, please do. I'm excited about that.
All right. You have a good one. Thank you for being on Mold Talks, and talk to you soon.